Welcome back to African Voices. I'm Dr. Sibanda with Tchiyiwe. We are continuing our discussion on Sudan within a broader African context of dictatorships and the people rising to deal with their own dictators within those countries. And in this segment, we're going to look a bit at how the people who live in these dictatorships deserve or lack support from the broader African community and from the media at large in terms of pushing their agenda and that being understood, and how that sometimes gets drowned in the whole debate about whether or not one or two in their midst have acted violently. And I think that this is a debate that requires a little bit of discussion. So Tchiyiwe, just as we were going out of that last segment, part of the, and we did talk a little bit about the broad African context that sort of allows dictatorships to carry on. And that there is a general concentration on what's at the top. When people talk about, look, a president should be treated that way, a country should be treated that way, they forget that when you're talking about these countries, when you're talking about Sudan in the context, and that's my view, you're also talking about the people of Sudan who are on the street today. And I think that we should consider looking at what they're feeling, what they're going through, why they are on the street. Understand that. Understand that they live in a country that is fairly rich in terms of natural resources, and yet they don't have a share in that. That few at the top control these resources, and perhaps many of them have never felt like they live in a country that is rich. Isn't that part of the debate, and more as important to the debate as is the debate about whether we should have respected, people like Muammar Gaddafi's sovereignty to run his country, or talk about how the intervention from the West, which was disastrous, should have been handled. Can we talk about what if the Americans had not intervened, don't intervene, as they are not intervening in Sudan? Would that situation improve the plight of the people on the ground? So, look, I'm asking because I think that as someone who's experienced this, those who are at the bottom in any country, those who are on the streets, are forgotten. There are many excuses not to remember them because they're not powerful. What's your feel about the experiences of the Sudanese people who are on the streets?
It's something that I can empathize with. I cannot imagine it. I can empathize. I can only appreciate from a distance how horrible the situation is for the people on the ground. And I think it's even worse when it's people who you expect to protect you that actually come to kill you. I was just checking during the break about this, on the statistics of the number of people who've actually been killed during these protests over the last few days. And whilst officially media is reporting that 24 people have died as of 2 days ago, it's actually Human Rights Watch, which I think is quite a reliable source that works on the ground with people, is reporting that at least 40 people have died, in these clashes. And that's horrible. People do not have to go because they're fighting for the basics of living a life with dignity, They're being stripped of their dignity already with a harsh economy, the forgotten voices, as you're pointing out. And when we say the forgotten voices, we're really talking about these people who will never see a chance where they can be heard by anybody or be considered because they do not even understand how the systems work. They do not have any access to information, I think, that could empower them. They do not appreciate just how much power they have as citizens, and they do not know how to manipulate that so that they can influence government. And there's nobody there wanting to share that information with them. And in a similar context, it's not just Sudan. Unfortunately, Congo, which we were discussing earlier, has also got a lot of forgotten voices. The narrative is so forgotten for most of these countries that the media has even stopped covering them. You hear about 5 people being killed in a train smash somewhere else that's outside of sub-Saharan Africa, but then you won't hear about, for example, Al-Shabaab has killed 100 people in one village, for example, in Nigeria or Kenya or something like that. So the systems of power across the world are monopolized by a certain elite group. And yes, the forgotten voices never get a chance to influence anything.
Look, I'm trying, as you're speaking, I'm trying to make a comparison between the, can you imagine? Just recently, and then still ongoing, you have protests in France with the yellow vests. And these guys are in many ways allowed to protest, and if there are any deaths, very few of them are as a result of police action. The accidents, the 10th death recorded, it's a driver who was swerving to avoid protests and then ended up hitting somebody. So you have, and those to me are you can talk about those, and you can talk about how you increase security or how you increase safety around demonstrations. But what you have in the Sudan is people that are killed by live ammunition from the police.
Absolutely.
And in our discussions, we forget that these people who should not have died, because a shooting, a gunshot, is not an accident.
No.
It's not an accident.
It's intended.
It's intended.
It's a live,
Somebody
it's live ammunition. It's intended.
Somebody decides to execute.
Yes.
And they execute.
Yeah.
And they kill.
That's cold.
And no one has to answer for that.
No.
And we say, oh yeah, perhaps they didn't behave properly. We live in a world where even if you're to find somebody attempting to kill another person, you stop them from that act and send them to a judge.
Yes.
And they get tried and sentenced for that. But constantly you have this nonsensical debate in Africa, and sometimes propelled by international media, that somehow suggests that if a protester is doing something illegal, they must be killed. The police officer or the security officer must be the judge, the jury, and the executioner. At the same time, one person decides to kill. And I'm saying, this shouldn't be allowed.
And why is it still going on? With that, I have no counter argument, because I totally agree with you on this. I absolutely agree with you. And also the fact that it continues to happen. We've seen it happen, so we've had chances where we can say, hey, this should not be happening. And in fact, the leaders themselves, what they do actually, in a very annoying way, what they do is the minute that happens, they'll be the first ones to say, no, this did not come from the president. They were not authorized to kill. They must have been attacked. And it does come from the leaders themselves. What they don't do is actually condemn them, condemn the actions, and they should really condemn and actually, they should imprison them, because that's murder.
Yeah.
If you ask me, that is murder. We don't see that harsh kind of action against people from the armed forces, the security wings, that commit those crimes, and they're not considered crimes. And unfortunately, more often, I don't think I can even cite an example, for instance, in Zambia, where situations like that have arisen and the police have been held to account. Not too long ago, a university student died. She was asthmatic. She was in her room sleeping. University students were protesting on the streets because they were not getting their meal allowances or something like that from the bursary system of university education. And what happened is the police decided to come in. They actually entered the campus grounds where the students were not protesting. The students were actually protesting from the streets, the main streets outside of campus. But the police went into the premises of the university. What happened is they threw tear gas and cannons and things that I do not even understand relating to military ammunition. And one girl died at their hands. She was asleep. And the government up to now is not taking ownership for that. Yeah. The president has not condemned the police.
Yeah.
Instead, they've gone on to condemn the students who were protesting and saying, look, we need our meal allowances. We haven't been paid for so many months. How do you expect us to survive?
Yeah. Look, that is my debate, that we ought to, in this century, we ought to move our game a little further and stop talking about the things that we've always talked about, stop oversimplifying things. I understand clearly the debate about counteracting what you'd call neo-colonialism, neo-imperialism, whatever it is, and it happens everywhere in the world. But that should not preclude African leaders from being accountable for their actions. And I agree with you. It doesn't really matter how it's happened. Police officers, the state, the idea of a state is that we all put together our right to be violent in the hands of a state that uses that right rationally, that uses that ability to commit violence in a manner that serves the broader good.
Yeah.
In fact, its primary task should be to protect. Not to protect just those who are doing good, but also those who are doing bad, and then put them through a system of trial. And what we're seeing here, and Sudan is a specific example as we speak, and so is what's happening in Zimbabwe. So you have about 20-something or 30-something people dead, whatever the number is in Sudan. You have about 6 dead and many shot in Zimbabwe by live ammunition. I cannot, and I will never, I promise you, I will never bring my mind to bear with somebody who carries a gun and decides that I'm going to shoot. And I don't care who I shoot.
You take out.
Because right now, I mean, it's like a video game, isn't it? Where somebody is just saying, oh, well, you know, let me see if I can take out some people. And you're shooting at people that have no capacity to shoot back. And then you have a government, you have governments that are unwilling to answer for that. And then in some instances, you have journalists who ask the question, were the protesters being violent? As if, and this annoys me.
Victim blaming.
Yeah, this annoys me.
Yeah.
Because to a certain extent, it's a capitalist argument that says, oh, well, we had to protect property. They were vandalizing property. It's still, and in my context, it's really painful, where I still feel like we're saying human beings are somehow as important as property. I don't condone at all the destruction of anyone's property, because people work hard for their property.
No, yeah.
But I also feel like if I'm meant to choose between property and human beings,
human life,
I'm going to choose human life first.
Yeah.
And then we'll go on to property.
Yeah, no.
I don't care how many those lives are. But if you're going to have in this world, can you imagine if you had protest in Britain, in America, where the police have killed 24 people? We would all feel appalled. And yet, on the African continent itself, you don't have coverage of Sudan. No. The matters there. You don't have at all anybody on the international stage other than the human rights organizations like Amnesty International, the Human Rights Watch, that will raise those issues. And they're raising these issues across the globe. And one of the criticisms you get is that, no, they're only supporting, they're doing that because they're based in Washington. I think that we've got to get ourselves to a point where we allow the debate about the sanctity of life to be held as more important than any other debate. Yeah. Life should be sacrosanct.
And also we should hold the value systems that definitely determine you have no right to take anybody's life.
Yes.
You know, who are you? It's not your life to take away.
Yeah.
You know?
Can't play God.
You can't play God with people's lives.
Yeah.
And the complacency, it's not news anymore. We've become so complacent. It's not news when people die like that. Not everywhere, but in certain spaces, like we're seeing now in Sudan. It's not big news. It should be big news.
Yeah,
it should matter. It's a generation being wiped out. It's the productive generation being wiped out. It's the people who are going to influence policy and change things around that are being killed. It should matter.
Yeah, it should be important.
And the media as well. So now the onus is also on our media. So international media will cover some of this, but where is our media in all this?
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that's part of the problem in Africa. Even if you look at Sudan, Sudan controls access to journalism within the country in a very restrictive way.
Yeah.
But over and above that, the only media that could project things outside is state-controlled, and the only media that will be accepted in will be media that seems to conform. I mean, but I also experienced this with respected journalists that I would have respected. You know, when I was in the middle of the killings, talking about the killings in August in Zimbabwe, where another six people were killed by the Mnangagwa regime. Where the question was, yeah, but what about the violence? And I'm saying, I understand that, but if you're talking to me and we're talking about the death of people, if you're saying to me protesters killed another protester, then we can equate that to the military killing people. Yeah, we can talk about that. But if protesters haven't killed another human being, don't come to me and talk about violence when I'm talking about the state killing, executing people on the streets.
Yeah.
Let's finish the debate about public executions by the state and then go on to the debate about violence. And I hope that we begin to make that very clear to everyone who has doubts about what should be more important, people or property. And we make that clear in a way that also doesn't say that protesters should naturally go out and commit acts of violence against property.
Towards abusing the system as well. It should definitely be peaceful.
In fact, the best way to put pressure on government.
Make your statement. Make your statement, be heard. Don't be violent, of course not, you know. And if not for your, for your safety, you know, then at least for those around you, if you don't care, you know, because the snowball effect is obviously atrocious, like we're seeing now, and it's actually very painful when you put it into context, and especially, I guess, with you, in your case where you were at the grassroots and working with people and seeing this firsthand. And obviously, as the party in opposition, you start to feel a lot of responsibility, because these are people that would have been protesting against results that were being contested, you know, so... Absolutely.
I mean, as is the case now in Sudan, and you realize that these are people that are contesting about existential issues, real issues. People are saying, look, we're hungry. We can't afford the bread.
Dignity.
We just want the dignity to be fair.
Human dignity.
Yeah. And then you have those people killed. And then you look at yourself and say, but well, should we feel guilty for... protesting because people do end up being killed, and it's a difficult balancing act, especially given that in the Sudanese case you have now a call for a president who's been in power for 30 years.
Yeah, 30 years. I think so,
and people are saying, well, step down as well. Now, should we then say, because some people may come in and cause violence, that struggle for a more democratic society should be shelved?
No, it should definitely not. This is exactly what even people who are fighting for, you know, our founding fathers, the people who fought for Africa's emancipation, they had to endure a lot of that, but they fought. They kept fighting. We should not shelve the fight, but at least we should be protected. People should be protected when they fight for their cause. Yeah. They're as entitled to that country as their leaders are. Yeah. Nobody is better than the other.
But look, the oversimplified idea that you get more regularly if you are in political spaces is that public demonstrations, and I face this every day. It's some of these things that you think from time to time, should I be reconsidering even participation? Because look, people get killed all the time, and you almost know it. You don't know if it's going to be you or if it's going to be the person next to you, but you know that the military or the police are going to come in and kill people in a strong way. And then people ask you, and then I've had this being asked, so people are going onto the streets, don't you know that the police or the military is going to come and try and kill somebody? And you say, in a sense, you know, it's become norm that they do that.
No,
we don't know who they're going to kill.
It shouldn't be expected. We shouldn't normalize the abnormal. That's the problem with African politics.
No, look.
The abnormal becomes normalized.
Yes.
We should not normalize the abnormal. That is abnormal that the police do that.
Yeah.
And we should also recognize the fact that in trying, when the people rise up, they'll be stifled, yeah? They'll be presented with forces that will react to that.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the people who are being opposed react in the wrong way by misusing military and security personnel. But the truth is, the main reason that happens is to make you do exactly what you're being encouraged to do, to shut up and shelve your argument. Yeah. Do not do that ever.
So I guess, and that is partly part of this discussion for me, to get exactly what you were saying, which is that we shouldn't shelve our fight. And on the African continent, in Sudan specifically, it is still very important to understand that those people probably, if they've had a leader for 30 years, they probably have no other option. Elections are not an option for them to change leadership, to get to a more democratic society. And you cannot convince me, and I don't think you can convince anybody, any right-thinking person, that these people have so loved and could only have had one leader in the last 30 years, and they didn't want to have any other leader. I think that you have people who were born, who were not born when this person became president, and they're now adults. And they still have one president. What about the rest of the talent that's rising in the country that could take over the leadership of the country and move it to the next step? So my argument and I guess the point that we're trying to make is that these people deserve an opportunity to restructure their country. And the Sudanese people are attempting to do that via public demonstrations, because that is the only constitutional, lawful way to do it outside an outright uprising against the government, an armed or an illegal uprising. And so the media, ourselves, commentators like you, I think, should do or take a much stronger role in encouraging and supporting these people that really have very limited choices in terms of how their country is run. And the African continent and African commentators, and I see there are many of them, I don't think have caught on to the idea that the new disciplining tool and it was used during colonialism. The new disciplining tool for those who are oppressed by our new oppressors is that sit round and be peaceful. And by peaceful, they mean don't contest our ideas, don't contest who becomes the next president. So I think that we should do our best to kind of support these people, including the Sudanese people.
Absolutely, and obviously you can't take away from the fact that the visible presence of an idea is when you see a lot of people gathered together, putting it forward, and then you see how many actually are challenging what's the status quo, for example, in this case. And I think protests should be encouraged, because it means you see the next person who actually agrees with you and who sees things the way you do, and you represent, you show that there's more than just one voice that's actually saying we can do this, we need this for our country. That's a visible presence. I think it's a very strong way of putting an agenda forward. But speaking of peace, I'll do that, So that's peace, quote unquote. So Zambia, which is my country of heritage, is a country renowned for peace. But there is such a thing called unproductive peace. And the poverty levels of Zambia have never, ever, ever elevated because we're a peaceful country.
So people aren't taking action.
People aren't taking action. So you, again, a case of you're comfortable where you are. No, you're not comfortable. People complain, but then the system just keeps trampling you down, and then you're saying, well, Zambia is known to be a peaceful country. Protesting is not lack of peace. Protesting is a demonstration of your disagreement.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. That's another debate for another day. This is African Voices. Thank you for joining us this week. We hope to see you next week when we look at another hotspot on the African continent, the positives and the negatives. I'm Dr. Sibanda with our analyst, Tchiyiwe. It's a goodbye for today. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Bailo Jallo. Thank you for watching African Voices on our YouTube channel. You can watch more of our contents by clicking here, and don't forget, you can also subscribe by clicking there. And every Wednesday, we're on Sheffield Live from 8 p.m. till 9 p.m. Thank you.